So, welcome back to part 3 of the State of Gaming post E3 podcast, where we're going to talk about Ubisoft, who many say was the winner of this year's E3. Debatable, and probably only because of the one big announcement they had at the end, but we'll get to it. But let's start with how they started. Mario and Rabbids, which we talked about a bit.
Yeah, they got Miyamoto in there.
Yeah.
As usual, Miyamoto comes out with some props, and, it's really weird, but it's Ubisoft and Nintendo. Like, they're both like the weird E3 showers, and, I mean, like, we discussed this a little bit at Nintendo's conference podcast, but, I mean, it's strange, and I don't want to like it, but at the same time, it is intriguing to some degree. As much as I really hate the Rabbids, it's cool to see Nintendo opening its doors a little bit and letting in some other third-party developers.
Yeah, it's good for Nintendo because it gets them out there more,
right.
And again, like we said during when we were talking about their conferences, they're on the up, and things like this, even if it's not something hardcore fans are going to go crazy for, it's still something that will probably sell, and it's still at least showing that they're willing to try things. Like, the most interesting thing for me was the XCOM style combat, which is a little more tactical and in depth than you get necessarily from a Mario game oriented, especially towards children with the Rabbids. So yeah, it's got the Rabbids that may appeal more to the younger audiences, but then you have the XCOM style combat and the strategy, which may appeal more to the older audience who likes to see different kinds of gameplay in a Mario game.
Right. So I mean, there's really not much else to say other than that, like, it's weird to see a Rabbid dressed up as Princess Peach, but you know what?
And did you see she has her own Instagram page now?
No, you're joking.
Oh, that is 100% true.
Honestly, I guess that's good marketing. It's just so bizarre.
Yeah.
Like, what is even happening here?
Rabbid Peach taking selfies of herself, and yeah, it's weird. But hey, gets the word out, I guess.
Right. So okay, I mean, I'll keep my eye on it. I just don't really. I'm still a little confused about the whole game, but it's weird, and maybe we need more weird games to push boundaries.
I've been all for weird games this year, like Nier and Torment and such. Weird is good. I mean, we just came out of a generation that ended with basically everything being the same as it was a year ago, right? Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, Halo, etc. So weird and different ideas, even if they're off-putting at first, it's just good to see. It's good to see people taking chances again.
Okay, I could agree with that. So we also saw more of Assassin's Creed, which we covered also in Xbox conference.
Not much more to say on it. Again, just same as we said in the Xbox conference. It's got my attention. There's some things to be concerned about. There's some things to be excited about. Who knows with that?
Yeah. We'll kind of have to see a bit more because I'm almost convinced that we'll need to wait till reviews come out or till we can play it to really get a good idea of whether is this just another Assassin's Creed, just feeling stagnant, or is this going to be something new that really spices up that.
I feel like it may end up being a pretty divisive game because I feel like there's going to be some people who embrace the changes, and then there's the hardcore people who are like, no, we just want another Assassin's Creed 2, which always happens when a franchise kind of goes through a very soft reboot, but you can still call it that in this case. So it'll certainly be talked about quite a bit when we get closer to launch and when it launches.
For sure. We also got the Crew 2, which is now introducing boats and planes. I don't think either of us are really big racing fans.
No.
And I mean, the Crew 1 was a little bit disappointing in terms of, like, I could play a couple racing games here and there, and the Crew 1 wasn't exactly the most interesting for me. But I do think that it was smart of them to introduce the sky and water vehicles, just because it does set them a bit apart from games like Forza and Need for Speed. They have their own thing now.
More variety.
Right. So that's what they're pushing, and I think that's okay. I think that's smart, actually. Even if it's not necessarily a game I'm going to be playing. Right, so let's see. We also got Steep DLC, which
Olympics DLC, which probably excites the people who just enjoyed Steep, but again, it's like with the Crew and those types of games in general. It's not what we're watching E3 for. So there's not much to say on it.
Yeah, and then we also have Elijah Wood teaming up with Ubisoft for Transference, which is, I guess, a VR horror game. We know very little about this game right now, but that doesn't mean I'm not incredibly excited.
Cause it's definitely. I mean, we were all watching it like, what's going on here, and that's good, that's always a good thing to have You know, it's, again talking about creativity and surprises and weirdness. That kind of that game checked the box off on all of those for its, at least for its first appearance. You know.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I love VR. I love horror. So why not mesh those two together and get something? I bet it would be really terrifying if they keep it within a house and like a tight setting.
Yeah.
I think the idea was that you're supposed to be living through people's experiences or something.
Yeah, that's
like
kind
that.
of what I got through it. Got the gist from it, but we'll definitely need to see more.
Curious.
Yeah,
like, this
for sure.
I find this is for me a lot more interesting than I think it was called Eagle Flight, their other VR game.
Yeah.
Which I mean, that was unique also, but I think this is really like I'm down.
This is a game that's going to try and take advantage, or hopefully really take advantage of what VR is capable of.
Exactly.
You know? Make it less of a gimmick and more of a mainstay in gaming, which is still something that VR needs to accomplish before it really takes off.
Exactly, and I have high hopes for this one. I'm just going to say. Also, having Elijah Wood on board just makes me even more excited. All right, and then we have Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves for adults.
Skull and Bones.
Yeah.
Well, there's no we haven't seen many off-boat moments, so
no.
I'm thinking this is a bit different in
I
that
think
regard.
It's much more combat focused. Although I did hear that there is going to be a narrative campaign with it, which kind of surprised me because what they showed seemed like a purely multiplayer competitive experience.
Exactly.
Which would also still make it very different from Sea of Thieves, which was a more of a co-op, like, exploration experience where this is much more combat oriented. But if they actually have a narrative and a single player or probably a co-op story, that could be interesting because there's not a lot of good pirate stories in games, and that could help differentiate it from Sea of Thieves, which probably won't have much of any story, or if it would, it'll be lighthearted and all that. Whereas this could take a real authentic, especially if they borrow from Assassin's Creed tendency for historical accuracy. There's a lot of potential there. Like, I'm definitely more interested in seeing more about what this narrative is like than more of the combat.
Well, the historical accuracy might go out the window when we saw that Kraken at the very end.
True, but again, though, like with Origins, they seem to be taking similar. But if they can still take a story that's mostly based in history and then throw in a few fantasy elements just to, throw some spice into it. But if the story's good, and suddenly that game becomes much more interesting.
Yep, I'm not really into the whole naval combat parts of like Assassin's Creed 3 and 4, but I am really curious about the campaign, and I think it kind of reminds me of when For Honor was announced, and like how they said it was going to have a campaign as well, and I was like, what? How are they're really going to do that? It looks like a multiplayer only game. I think this is a good way of approaching these styles of games, because if you looked at what happened with Evolve or with Titanfall 1 or Battlefront 1, you know how angry people get when you just make a multiplayer only game with no campaign, because people like to play by themselves as well. Myself, case in point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even if the single player takes a back seat, like in Call of Duty, it doesn't mean that you can't have a quality experience with that as well, and I think that really makes it replayable. Like, it also makes it replayable, because if the player base dies, the game's useless.
Yeah.
So, then there's this Starlink battle for Atlas, which at first I was like, oh my god, what is this? And then I saw the toys, and I was like, it kind of was a bit of a bummer for me that it's going to be a Toys to Life game. I know that whole genre would have been like the shit for me as a kid. Like, I would have been obsessed with that if I was around 10 years old, but as an adult, I feel like I kind of missed that boat, and it doesn't really appeal to me in the same way. I don't think I'm the target demographic for this style of game.
No.
Although, I do have to respect the idea that you can customize your ship in real life, and that customizes it in the game. It's
cool, but it's not something we're going to spend $80, well, way more than $80 on.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be a money sink with all the ship parts you have to buy.
Part of the point, yeah.
So, it's a cool idea, but I feel like it's definitely more of a money grab than anything else, and will appeal to kids and people with hardcore nostalgia for that kind of stuff, they'll probably make a decent amount of money off of it, but I don't think it's going to be something that becomes a mainstay.
Yeah, I think it's a tough world to live in when it comes to Toys to Life. Like, we saw Disney Infinity sort of die down, and that leaves us with Skylanders, which has also been kind of quiet lately, and the Lego Worlds. That's the one or Lego Dimensions, I think it's called. Yeah, Lego Dimensions, which is doing quite well right now. I think that's like the main Toys to Life game that's succeeding. But it's also Lego, which is like this giant corporation that they have access to so many licenses that it almost seems unlikely that they would fail with that. I know. Although I think a lot of people are saturated with the Far Cry series, I think for some reason Far Cry 5 is really speaking to me. I like the idea that it's in America. You know, it's not exotic anymore, or it's exotic but within a familiar
familiar type of exotic.
Yeah, which is, I think it's interesting, and I also like that it's like the kind of subject matters thing with let's say like religion and
cult fanaticism.
Yeah, I like that. Like it seems more nitty gritty, and it feels like it sets up the stage for a really good action campaign.
Yeah,
and you can make your own character as well, which is interesting. I don't think that was really necessary, but you know what? Why not?
Yeah, if you can still make it work within the narrative, then there's no reason not to do it. You know.
Yep. And I mean, they also showed that you're gonna have a dog, a la Fable and Fallout, and you know that's okay with me too. I mean, they showed it off in an interesting way. You know, the dog can attack people, could bring you back ammo, sort of like a quieter Elizabeth, just helping you out, but not getting too much in the way. I hope it doesn't lead up to a very dramatic moment where the bad guy kills your dog and you have to watch your dog get stabbed or something. But we get to talk about the biggest thing,
the big thing,
probably one of the biggest, probably the top 3 biggest things of E3 this year.
I think if you probably took a poll, it probably would be number 1, just because of how I mean, like it
showed a lot,
and it's within that realm of people didn't believe it was going to happen, like with like where Half-Life still is.
Metroid Prime 4.
For some people, yeah. I know some. Well, for some people, like Shenmue before it was announced, and it was a big deal, and it definitely stole the show both for Ubisoft's conference and in general, especially with the lack of surprise. Like, not only was it a big surprise, but in comparison to the overall lack of surprises, with the exception of Nintendo's conference, it really shined. And I feel like it's the main reason why most people are like Ubisoft won E3, because the rest of their conference was just like everyone else's. You saw what you expect to see. You saw some few weird things maybe you weren't expecting, but there was no big surprises. This was the big surprise, and yeah, it was a big one, and it looks good. And
so Beyond Good and Evil 2, this is something that like people have been, like you said, the people have been waiting for this. People didn't know it was going to happen. There have been trailers kind of in and out every now and then, but it was kind of like rumored at this point.
Yeah.
No one expected to see it at E3 this year for sure, and so that's like really good on them for keeping it a secret. We didn't really see any gameplay details at E3.
No.
However, just recently, I'm not sure if you saw, they did
I've seen bits of like the gameplay demos that they've shown, and like flying around, and
like the sense of scale.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I find one thing really interesting, and maybe we can talk about this later at a different time, but I find it really funny how we're in a state. The state of gaming right now is at a point where we've seen open world games be jumping from a city, like in Grand Theft Auto, to maybe a country in games like Skyrim or Oblivion or even Morrowind, which is quite large, and we're skipping over country continent style land masses. We're skipping over planets. We're going straight to like galaxies. We're like, oh well, why? Like, I don't know why we haven't seen a planet open world game. Like, if they could focus the detail on just one planet alone, I feel like why not do that? But instead, they're like, no. Like, planets are not even big enough. We need to have an entire, at least a solar system in our game, which I find is really funny. And they're showing off the scale in Beyond Good and Evil 2, and you're gonna be able to make your own character. You're gonna have other players come in and drop out. It's almost worrisome how ambitious this game is, and I really don't want to see it fail like No Man's Sky did, because they showed the city like in the gameplay demo that we saw, or the alpha or whatever it's supposed to be, and I like the idea that there would be cityscapes, and maybe there'd be a little more life to them than anything we could see in No Man's Sky, but I don't want to see them stretched so thin, because Michel Ancel, the director, was discussing how he wants to keep a lot of detail in the game despite it being so big. And while I think it's commendable for him to say that, I want to stay realistic here. I know that the development process is a bit grueling for a game that's that big, and I don't know if it's possible to do that within a realistic time frame, like 3 years or something. So I do have my worries for this game. If he can hold on to his promises and make a game as good as Rayman Legends, then you know what? this could stand to be one of the biggest games ever.
For sure. It definitely is going to have the hype behind it to warrant that kind of talk.
That'll put some pressure on
whether or not it delivers, well, we'll find out eventually.
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't bust like No Man's Sky. That's all I ask for.
Yeah, oh man. There'd be a lot of upset people. Because at least No Man's Sky was its own new IP. But this is like... This is a big deal, you know?
Yeah, so the first one was very loved. So hopefully they keep it together for the sequel.
Yep. That about sums it up for Ubisoft, I think. I mean, we don't have to talk about their dance games.
No. I mean, I think that just saying it was enough.
That's it.
That's all we needed to know. They didn't even really show anything else.
So we'll end with that and talk about Sony next.